Space, the final frontier. This is the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. Its mission to explore the solar system, to seek out new observations and data, to boldly go where no podcast has gone before. And now the host of the Observer's Notebook, Tim Robertson.
Hello and welcome to episode 204 of the Observer's Notebook, the official podcast of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. My name is Tim Robertson, and I'm the host of the Observer's Notebook and also the coordinator of the training program within the ALPO. Thank you for downloading and listening. The Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers collects and analyzes observations of various solar system bodies and associated phenomena, and publishes detailed reports concerning these bodies in its quarterly publication, the Journal of the Association of Lunar and Planetary Observers. This podcast depends upon donations from you, our listeners, to keep it going. If you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, you can donate to it via Patreon. You can start off by giving as little as $1 a month. If you feel even more generous, for $5 you receive early access to the podcast before it goes public. For a monthly donation of $10, you receive a copy of the Novice Observer's Handbook. And for $35 a month, you receive producer credits on the podcast. You can find out more by going to www.patreon.com/observersnotebook. And if you'd like to join the ALPO, membership begins at only $22 a year. Find out more at www.alpo-astronomy.org. And you can also find us on Facebook. Just search for ALPO Astronomy. And this podcast also has a Facebook page as well. Just search for Observer's Notebook. And if you enjoy what you hear in the podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll never miss an episode. And now, episode 204, and we're talking to Robert Reeves about the moon. Enjoy. All right, I'd like to welcome everybody back to this edition of the Observer's Notebook podcast. And today we have a very special guest, astrophotographer and author Robert Reeves. Welcome to the podcast, Robert.
Oh, I'm very glad to be here. It's always fun to talk to people about astronomy in general and the topic very close to my heart nowadays, the moon.
The moon. Yeah. What inspired your basically lifelong fascination with the moon?
Well, I kind of fell in love with it before there was a space program. Way back in the early 1950s, I remember watching the moon rise through my bedroom window in my home here in San Antonio. Before we moved overseas, I was 4 years old when we moved to Lisbon, Portugal, a military move. My stepfather was the air attaché for the American embassy over there. So we spent the Korean War in Lisbon, Portugal. But prior to that, I remember watching the moon, full moon, rising through my bedroom window. And there were two bedroom windows in that room facing the east. And at an early age, I realized, sometimes the moon rises through the window on the left, and sometimes the moon rises on the window on the right. So early on, I discovered the moon kind of wanders around the sky. So I became fascinated by it, but it really wasn't until I got back to the United States and was about the time the space program started. Sputnik came around back in 1957 and just ignited everybody's interest in the sky.
That's true.
And that's when I really get into high gear with this. And by 1959, I took my first picture of the moon, which was nothing to brag about, but I wish I had that picture. It's been lost through many moves.
Right.
But by the time I was in the 8th grade, I had a 4-inch Criterion Dynoscope. And I was able to take reasonably good pictures of the moon with this World War II era Voigtlander folding camera, one of these old cameras that had a bellows and it opened up and the lens extended.
Oh yeah.
And I think it took 620 film, and mounted the camera on a tripod, aimed it down into the eyepiece, and independently discovered the afocal method of lunar photography. And there was an eclipse of the moon back in March of 1961, I believe. And I was able to get some really good pictures of that. I didn't have an enlarger at the time, but I had a contact printer, and the 620 negatives were fairly large, about uh, 2.5 inches across. So just making simple contact prints of those negatives and showing them to my science class in the 8th grade, it caused quite a stir. And I began to realize, well, I'm not the only one interested in this. It catches the attention of other people.
Right. Now, let's step back, and you mentioned your 4-inch telescope you had. Tell me the story of that. How you came about that telescope.
It was a Christmas present in 1960. Before that, a year before that, I was given a little 50 millimeter refractor. It wasn't the ubiquitous Tasco. It was a telescope that was actually much worse.
No.
Yeah, it's from a company called Southern Precision Instruments, and there was nothing precision about the optics. It wouldn't even resolve the rings of Saturn.
Oh my goodness!
But it kept me going. I could see the sun with eyepiece projection. I could see the moon, follow the phases of the moon. I remember in the, it was late, sometime in 1959, because I was still living in Miami, Florida at the time. Watched the eclipse of the moon through that thing and took notes and wrote it up into an unsolicited report for my science class in the 7th grade, and the teacher was mightily impressed, and again reinforced this idea that if you communicate science effectively, people will listen. And I got that idea early on.
Interesting. Communicate science effectively, people will listen. I hope that's true today. Really do.
Well, getting their attention is the main thing. Getting through the clutter of all the other stuff, all the weird stuff on YouTube, all the silly stuff on Instagram and whatnot. Celestron today, I do work for Celestron. They have me do videos about the moon, and I did a couple of them about can you see the flag on the moon? And by golly, that thing got over 1 million views. I could not believe it. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
And I looked at Instagram on my phone just to see what it was all about. And I don't know, I guess I'm too old. It just did not appeal to me. But apparently there's enough people out there scrolling around through this stuff that when they tripped over that video about can you see the flag on the moon, it got their attention, and 1 million views. That just staggers me.
Yeah, that's a common asked question though at star parties a lot of times when people are looking at the moon first time. Show me where the flag is, and you can't. You show the vicinity where it should be, but
well, yeah, we're limited on what we can show people through a telescope on the ground. A number of years ago, let me think, it was probably 25 to 30 years ago. Jim Lovell's granddaughter, Apollo 13, Jim Lovell's granddaughter, went to the same grade school that I did.
Oh,
back when I came back from Europe, and they asked me to do a star party for the class, and I didn't know Lovell's granddaughter was in the that class until I got there, and one of the mothers pulled me aside and said, "I just want you to know, Jim Lovell's granddaughter is at this class, and she may be asking you some rather pointed questions." And said, "Really, you're her mother?" I said, "Okay." In the Apollo 13 movie, which daughter were you? It is, oh, I was the rebellious one. But apparently she calmed down. But sure enough, Jim Lovell's granddaughter came up to the eyepiece, and she wanted to see Mount Marilyn, the mountain on the moon that Jim Lovell had named after this young girl's grandmother. And unfortunately, of course, it's too small. I can't point it out. Just like the flags on the moon. There are some things we just cannot resolve effectively from the Earth.
That's wild. That's wild. Good story. Now, you've become well known for your lunar photography. What draws you to the moon as your primary subject?
Well, it never looks the same night after night, even month after month, because libration angles can be different. The shadows are a little different. The illumination is always different. It accentuates different details. You can go back to the same area of the moon again, month after month, and discover new things that the shadows and the contrast reveal, and show more details of the geology that escaped you before. Once you understand how the moon evolved, how only two processes created all the features we see on the moon. They're either created by an impact or subsequent volcanic modification or repeated cycles of those two forces. And you look at the moon long enough and you begin to realize, well, this overlays this, and this happened first, and then this geologic feature formed, and you begin to understand the evolution of how the moon, the face of the moon came into being. And you start to understand it on that level. You become friends with the moon. The moon is something that you understand. It's not just a collection of bumps and holes that you're seeing through a telescope. Each crater has its own personality. No two are alike. They're just like snowflakes, or children on a playground. Generically, they all look the same, but you look close, yes, you can tell that's Timmy, that's Billy, that's Susan, that's Nancy. But generically, yeah, they're all about the same size, and so once you understand the moon on that level, it becomes a whole different world. It's not just this bright light in the sky anymore.
Right. Yeah. So do you have a favorite lunar feature that you constantly go back to?
Whatever is available at that phase can quickly become a favorite. It's like asking, which child of your 2 or 3 is your favorite? No, you can't do it. There's just too much variation to nail down one specific favorite. So I really can't answer that question. I get asked that a lot, but I do not have an answer for it.
Okay. What are some of the techniques you use for capturing your images?
Well, it's all very basic. Dedicated planetary camera. We started out with the webcams and made adapters for them and put them on the telescope. And I like to think that book I wrote back in 2006, Introduction to Webcam Astrophotography.
I've got that over here in my on my library.
Oh, how about that? Well, I like to think that book sparked the planetary camera industry, because now we can get off-the-shelf cameras that have friendly software that we can intuitively operate these cameras with. Traditionally, I don't use the manufacturer's software. I use Fire Capture. I use Fire Capture, and I can't believe I forgot that name, but nonetheless, it's a very intuitive program that's a lot more friendly than some of the programs that originally came with the first cameras. The step up from webcams were the old DMK cameras from the imaging source, and much better cameras than what we had with the webcams. In fact, some of my really good pictures of the moon that I just recently illustrated, the photographic atlas of the moon, were taken with those cameras darn near 20 years ago. But nonetheless, the software that came with them was basically an adaptation of machine vision control program. And it wasn't necessarily the friendliest, but like I said, Fire Capture, and then there's a couple of others out there too that people like, but Fire Capture is the one that I prefer. I would say everybody should be rooted to it. Try the different ones that are out there. After all, they're free. And the one that fits your style, that you're comfortable with, is the one that you use.
Yeah, Fire Capture is pretty user-friendly.
Oh, yeah.
They
go out of their way to make it that way, and I really appreciate that, because I'm more of a computer user instead of a computer nerd, and trying to figure out the ins and outs of programs is not one of my favorite things to do. I just want the darn thing to work.
Right. Now, when you're taking these images and then you review them later. Have you been surprised by anything you've seen later in the images?
Yeah, once I understand the geology of a region, I find new minute features that sometimes I'll discuss them when I do my periodic postcards from the moon on Facebook. Yeah, sometimes I'll go back to an old picture and I'll talk about new features in it that escaped my attention earlier, but now I find fascinating since now I understand the relationship of those particular features with the rest of the geology.
Yeah, I really enjoy reading your postcards from the moon. It's a good article. You said periodically. How often do you think you do that?
Well, I tried to do it daily, but life gets in the way sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, we've had uh, difficult medical situations with friends and family lately that has taken up an awful lot of my time. So it's kind of in hiatus now for the past few weeks, but I really want to get back to it because it keeps me fresh on this and keeps me excited about it. And I don't want it to go stale and just get out of the routine.
Yeah, and I've noticed in some of them where you do talk about you took this image years ago, and now looking at it with today's eyes, you're seeing different things and that you noticed before, and it's interesting to look at the photograph that way.
Yes, it's the more you look at the moon and think about it, not just look at it, bumps and holes, but think about what happened here. What happened 4 billion years ago when this scene was created and frozen in time and for us to analyze and enjoy today. You learn more and more about it as you go along. I don't have any degree in geology. I don't have a degree in planetary sciences or anything, but I like to think that if I pay attention to the experts, a little bit of it's going to rub off, and I'll understand it, and then I can spread the word amongst others. And apparently, I've picked up enough along the way that I was able to successfully write 2 books about it, despite my lack of a degree.
Yeah. Now, what motivates you to share your knowledge through the books and the articles that you write?
It's just fun to talk about it. When you go back a half a century ago to when I was in school, I wasn't the best student in the world. In fact, my senior English grade is what won me a free all expense paid government vacation in Vietnam.
No.
So, but strangely, fast forward, that's exactly what I'm doing now. Despite my poor English grades, I'm well known as a writer now. So anything is possible if you just pick at it long enough. And my senior English teacher from 1965 came to one of our class reunions. I think it was, oh gosh, I don't know, probably about the 40th class reunion. She's still alive. She showed up, and I heard she was coming. So I made a point of collecting up all the books I had written up to that point, and it was quite an armload. And I lugged them over and put them down in front of her. I said, "Look, I know I did not have a very good grade at your class, but you taught me enough. I got enough from your class, despite my grade, to do this." And I pointed to those books, and I just saw her eyes light up.
Robert.
So she succeeded in doing what she needed to do despite the grades that were recorded in her notebook.
That's incredible. My wife's a teacher, retired teacher, and she's had students come back to her later and tell her same types of things. And it's just it for all the heartache and crap they have to put up with in the classroom. that one student saying what you said to your teacher makes it all worthwhile. That's really awesome.
Yeah,
that's really awesome.
I felt I owed it to her, because that's kind of put me on the map.
Yeah.
She done good, and I wanted her to know that.
That's very good. That's very good. So the world is getting more interested in the moon again because we're talking about going back to the moon. Yeah. How do you see the moon's role in inspiring future generations for astronomers?
Well, it's going to be an anchor in the sky that we can see despite light pollution. I mean, the moon laughs at light pollution. It doesn't care. You can observe the moon underneath a bright street light, and all that's going to do is light up your map for you so you can navigate around. But yeah, Artemis is going back to the moon sometime. God knows when. But as Artemis becomes more and more in the news, the moon will float up higher and higher into people's consciousness. And if you get Astronomy magazine, the current issue, the cover article is about the Artemis program. And that is kind of a historical issue because Astronomy magazine admitted that they made a mistake for the first time in the history of the magazine. That cover article is mine, written by Robert Reeves. But when they cut and paste the artwork together, the editor's name got put in as the author.
Oh no!
And, yeah, so when you look at that 10-page article about the Artemis program in the current issue of Astronomy, it says Mark Zastro on it, a friend of mine. I consider him a friend, but it was a pure mistake. And I understand how mistakes like that can happen because there's a similar, though not name-wise, mistake in my exploring the moon with Robert Reeves, and only one person has found it.
Really?
Yeah, but
wow.
when I discovered it, I went back through my manuscript, and that mistake was staring me in the face for 3 years, and it got past multiple proofreaders. So what I understand what happens. We're so concentrating on the text to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed that the peripheral part of the article gets past us, and we didn't notice it. Now, in my case, in case of Astronomy, yeah, Mark's name was pasted into the author instead of Robert Reeves. In the case of my book, in chapter 1, well, on all the chapters, the chapter name is at the bottom of each page. Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is a world close to our heart. World, R-O-L-D, like a planet. Yet on alternate pages, it says a word. Close to our heart. Somehow an L got dropped out of it, and although it is a correct word, it is not the proper word. But I look at it now and I kind of laugh at it and think that both pages have a relevant meaning to this by sheer accident.
Yeah.
So, but nonetheless, that illustrates how little details like that can get past multiple proofreaders. So. We've come to an agreement. Mark will pick up my bar tab at NEAF. So
well, I was going to say the check for the article did clear too, right?
Yeah. Well, of course. But yeah. So when we get to NEAF, Mark will pay.
There you go. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah. What? Someone starting out in astronomy, what kind of advice would you give them today?
Starting out in astronomy, well, first thing, wander on over to the bookstore and get the Backyard Astronomer's Guide by Alan Dyer and Terence Dickinson. I cannot find a better beginner's guide to everything amateur astronomy. And then don't go hog wild on buying a big telescope right off the bat. I mean, it's an expensive proposition. Do literally go to your local astronomy club, kick the tires with the telescopes that they have, see what you like. Don't be dazzled by an ad by any one particular telescope company. Test fly them at your local astronomy club before you make a decision. Find out how they're controlled. How easy is it to learn how to use these things? There's a definite hierarchy to building yourself up to this. Last thing in the world we want to do is to have an enthusiastic astronomer become so frustrated they either eBay the telescope or it just sits in a closet.
Yep. Yeah, and a lot of astronomy clubs have telescopes that you can they loan out.
Oh yeah, yes. And there is libraries that do the same.
Yes,
library loanoscopes.
Yeah.
So kind of play around with stuff like that and get your feet wet in it and see, is this really my cup of tea? And if so, well, then, like I said, the local astronomy club is a wealth of practical information on how to proceed and what equipment to do.
I'm sure through your books and articles you've inspired others to take a look at the moon. But who originally inspired you?
Oh, a number of people. The Lunar Orbiter project back in the late 1950s was a major inspiration to me, and that wasn't any one particular person. That was a NASA project to map the moon prior to the Apollo landings. And I was very fortunate that during a majority of the Lunar Orbiter project, I was stationed at the Yorktown Naval Weapons Station, just down the road from Hampton, Virginia. And Hampton, Virginia is home of the Langley Research Center, which was the project manager for Lunar Orbiter.
Mm.
So the local newspaper was always full of the latest about happening with Lunar Orbiter. So the images that came back from Lunar Orbiter revealed a moon that we had never seen from the Earth before. The geology in such detail that we had no idea prior to this, and in a very short time, our knowledge and understanding of the moon just exploded. And keeping up with the Lunar Orbiter program was very inspiring. And later on, other people like Chuck Wood, when he used to have his lunar photo of the day, the write-ups that he would put with every picture went a long way to educating me about the moon. Paul Spudis wrote a book. Let's see. Oh, Lordy, more senior moments. There are a number of people that wrote very inspiring books about how we come to understand the moon, and these people all contributed to my passion for the moon and my desire to pass it along and carry it on to more people.
Has there been a moment or two in your career that has been the most rewarding for you?
Oh, well, things like being invited to speak at NEAF Talks, the on-stage thing at NEAF, having done so twice, just staggers me. I mean, various things like being invited to speak multiple times at the local Astronomy on Tap. Here in San Antonio, they have a very deep well of speakers from Southwest Research here in San Antonio, from the University of Texas. And invariably, all of these speakers are PhDs or PhD candidates. And then into that mix comes me. And the last thing in the world I want to tell them is, I'm a retired South Texas truck mechanic. I don't have a degree in anything, so I'm going to talk to you about all of this stuff, and please don't throw me off the stage. So just the fact that I get to get in the mix with all of these people, and they look up to me as one of their peers, it's just astonishing.
Right. Well, you are in true sense an amateur astronomer. I mean, the definition of the word amateur, and it's, so that is to be respected, sir. That is.
Well, I always say there's a book in every one of us. It's just a matter of dragging it out. You've got a passion about something. Everybody is, well, they have their own personal you got to be pretty brain dead not to have an interest that you've nurtured your entire, most of your life. And it's just a matter of taking the time to lay it out. I mean, people ask me, well, how do you write all these books? And I says, well, can you write a page in one day? Yeah, okay. After 365 days of doing that, what have you got? 365 pages. So it's not that difficult to write a book.
Mm.
It's the hard part is maintaining the rhythm and having some semblance of order to it. And fortunately, I've had very good editors who've assisted me with that. The only one that I didn't have an editor was with the Exploring the Moon with Robert Reeves book. That one I wrote, typeset, did the layout myself. Everything in that book was me. No professional help. So if you spot an error into it, yeah, I'm the guilty one.
So you're talking about books. Let's talk about your most recent photographic Atlas of the Moon, a comprehensive guide for the amateur astronomer.
Yeah, Firefly Books published that on August 1st, and available at regular bookstores in addition to the ubiquitous Amazon and various other online stores. So I'm incredibly impressed with the print quality that Firefly put into this book. When I look at the pictures in the book and I look at my original images that come off of my Canon wide format printer, there's very little difference. And sometimes the printing process actually increased the or softened, I should say, the contrast, so that there's you can see an increased amount of detail. It's really stunning how this happens. I first noticed that when a couple of years ago, Alan Dyer asked me to if I would mind contributing some moon pictures to their fourth edition of the Backyard Astronomer's Guide. Well, by the time we were finished, every moon picture in that book was mine. But when I got my copy of it, I was just dumbstruck at how good they look in print. Because I'm used to the old timey days when the printing dots were relatively big,
right?
And the resolution of the images were not that great. But printing is not that way anymore. I'm astonished that we can be printed in a book page now with modern printing techniques.
Fascinating. Now to write an atlas, though, that's a huge undertaking.
Well, by the atlas, that by very definition means we're going to go section by section by section across the moon. So that was fairly easy. Dividing it up into little chunks. Okay, here's an area you can see in one eyepiece view. Here's an area, another eyepiece view. So let's analyze what's in this area. So that was fairly easy. The hard part was doing it within 280 pages because that was my page limitation.
Wow, and you did.
Yep. Yeah, awesome. we barely got it in there. Boy, we were shoehorning some of the last parts into there.
Oh yeah. So what's the future bring for you?
Yet another book about the moon. On the 20th of this month, I bubble up to the top of Firefly's editing stack again, and this time we're doing a book about the history of lunar exploration throughout the pre-telescopic, through the telescopic era, up through the space age. So I've got it written. It's just a matter of waiting my turn in line for the editors to be able to pick it up. And theoretically on December 20th, I get back in line.
Oh, good. Well, I'll be looking forward to that book as well.
Wow. You and me both.
So do you have anything else you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, don't be shy about the moon. Astronomers in particular, have this notion that the moon is that big, bright light in the sky that blots out the deep sky. Well, nowadays, visually it may blot out deep sky, but astrophotography is advanced to the point where we can do just as good astrophotography from the middle of the city under a full moon than we used to do way out on a dark side. So the moon no longer is the enemy of astrophotographers. But at the same time, the moon is this marvelous geologic target. It is the closest world to the Earth. It is just 250,000 miles away. You can see more detail inside one lunar crater in a modest telescope than you can see on an entire planet. Mars or Jupiter. So don't shun the moon. It's an alternative target. When it's in the sky, it's just a viable target with as many joys and wonders as what you enjoy in the Milky Way when it's dark. So don't ignore the moon. Embrace it and make it part of your observing and learn about it. It's the only world human beings have ever explored. There are human footprints on that world. We can't say that about any other place. It's all science fiction if we're looking elsewhere. But we have been to the moon, and we still have moonwalkers alive today.
Yes, we do.
So if you have an opportunity to go to a convention and meet one of them, I strongly advise. So don't ignore the moon. Make it part of your astronomy.
That was very well said, Robert. I appreciate that. Very well. Well, I want to thank you today for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
All right. We will talk to you later.
Well, I sure hope so.
All right.
All righty. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Observer's Notebook podcast. I again want to thank Robert Reeves for coming on today and discussing the moon. Hey, get out there and observe the moon tonight, why don't you? We upload a new episode of the Observer's Notebook on the 1st and 15th of every month. You can subscribe to us on iTunes. If you do, please give us a rating and a review. I'd really appreciate it. You can listen to us on Apple Radio, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Google Play, Stitcher, Amazon Echo, Spotify, and the podcast is also available on our YouTube channel. You can help support the podcast by donating to it via Patreon, where you can give up to $35 a month, where you'll receive 1 year's membership to the ALPO and producer credits on the podcast. And with that, I want to thank our two supporting producers of the podcast, Mike Moyer and Steve Siedentop, for their generous support. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The link for Patreon as well as the link for the ALPO is in the show notes. If you'd like to get a hold of me, my email address is cometman@cometman.net, or on Twitter. Not Twitter anymore. I'm sorry. I'm no longer on there. Until next time, I hope you always have clear and steady skies. Thanks for listening.